Well, hello again, everyone. It's Robin here, Robin Eldred with Communicatto. We're shortly before 10 a.m. and we'll get started momentarily. I think we'll just give it another minute for perhaps some stragglers to join, but certainly in the interests of everyone's schedule, we will get started momentarily. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Advertising in 2018 webinar. We're going to get started. I know that we're going to have a few stragglers join us, and that's fine. I'd like to welcome everyone. Certainly, thank you for your time. I know everyone is very busy, so hopefully we're going to get a lot of value out of this, and I'm sure you're going to learn some very interesting things. In terms of some housekeeping items, this presentation today, if you do need to drop off or, people who are late won't hear this, but if you are late and you miss a bit at the beginning, not to worry. We'll be circulating this presentation when it is all done, shortly after it's done. A little tip to the wise too, if you do manage to stay to the very end, we are giving away something that is interesting, shall I say. So there will be a reward if you stay to the very end. Okay, so without further ado, let's get going. First of all, who am I? My name's Robin Eldred. I'm the Director of Advertising at Communicatto. This picture is not recent. I am somewhat older than this. This was taken in England back in 1973. I look more like this now, and in actual fact, I even look a little bit older than this too. But that's my role here at Communicatto, not surprisingly, is to be in charge of all of the digital advertising that we do for our clients. And that is what we're going to talk about today. So speaking of which, what specifically are we going to talk about today? Well, we've got 5 different sections here. We'll start off with a quick primer on what digital advertising is. I will regale you with some fascinating facts and figures. I'll also go into talking about what some of the ads actually look like. You've heard of the different ad types. We'll actually explore what they look like. Second section here is why would one want to do it? It may seem rather obvious, but we will certainly go into some of the details as to what it can do for you, what it can accomplish for you and your business. We'll talk about how it stacks up against traditional advertising. And also we'll identify some of the reasons why you may not be doing it. And I'm sure this will resonate with a few of you. The next section will be on best practices. So how do we actually do this? How does one do it? How does one do it right? And we'll spend a bit more time digging into the reporting and the optimization, because this, I think, is where a lot of people kind of fall down on digital advertising, the sort of measurement and optimization. We'll go through a couple of case studies, real-world case studies that Communicatto has done. And we'll finish off with a how-to guide. So what I want you to come away with today is not just background information on digital advertising, but actually a bit of a plan. If you're going to do it yourself, how do you do it? How do you get started? That's my goal for you today. So first off, what is digital advertising? Now, get out your bifocals, focus in really hard here. This is the digital landscape. This is called a Lumascape. And what this does is it illustrates all the different platforms, the main platforms, the main pieces of software around different digital components. On the left-hand side, we will see the advertising and promotion is just the left. And as an example, search and social advertising, there's a ton of different tools. It can be very overwhelming. You may recognize a few in here, Facebook, Google, you've probably heard of them. Anyway, the point being that the digital landscape is very large. But ultimately, what digital advertising is if you are familiar at all with the peso model, it is the P in peso. So it's the paid promotion of digital media. So it is the paid promotion of content, be that text or images or videos. And it's doing that through various digital channels. So you're familiar, I'm sure, everyone here, with, the social being the Facebook, the Twitters, and the LinkedIns of the world. We even later on in this presentation, I'll touch on influencer marketing, which is interesting. You're familiar, I'm sure, with search marketing, Google, and believe it or not, Bing and Yahoo still exist, and there are opportunities within them. Display advertising, banners and videos. We'll talk more about that. And native advertising, which is particularly interesting. You may have heard of the phrase programmatic as well. We'll touch on that. And I can't forget email. Email still, believe it or not, a top performer when it comes to digital advertising. So let's talk a little bit about the history of digital advertising. Don't worry, this will be quick. Basically, it all started back in 1994. The first clickable internet banner ad appeared from AT&T. We also had the first spam email back in 1994, which is kind of interesting. Already in 1995, the notion of targeting came to be in digital advertising. So not just, putting up billboards everywhere. It's more, hey, let's try to put a targeted message towards people that are more likely to find it interesting. 1996 is the arrival of a company called DoubleClick, which is now owned by Google. But really what's important about this date is that it is sort of the beginning of this idea of return on investment when it comes to digital advertising, and DoubleClick is finding a way to actually measure it. 97, good old pop-up ads. Fortunately, also in 1997, pop-up ads basically died away, I think with the exception of pornography. As I understand, it's still quite prevalent. So I'm told. So in 1998, we say hello to PPC, which is pay-per-click advertising, courtesy of, oh, nope, that's not Google. Google didn't invent it. Essentially a company, a website, goto.com was the first pay-per-click folks to hit the ground. But not far behind on the heels was Google AdWords back in 2000, a whole 18 years ago. A couple years later, Google introduces the notion of quality score, which is something that is quite interesting. I will touch on it later on, but it sort of changed the way in which digital advertising was done when it came to search. It wasn't just who had the deepest pockets. It was who was providing more meaningful advertising. About 12 years ago, we really started getting into what I've called hyper targeting, which is really, really detailed targeting, where really digital advertising starts to set itself apart from traditional advertising. And then on Facebook and YouTube, we see the first ads showing up there. And then in 2010, all the way back to 2010, is when native advertising started to appear, and promoted tweets appearing in Twitter. So a very quick history of digital advertising. And now let's chat about some facts and figures. Digital advertising is about 40% of all the media mix when it comes to advertising. It was back in 2017. It is projected to reach over half. It'll sort of hit that over 50% mark by the year 2021. And for reference here, we've got some, where the money is going with respect to TV and newspaper, magazine, et cetera. With respect to digital advertising, display advertising and search, these are the big winners right now. This is where all the money is going right now. I mentioned email earlier on. It's very effective, but it does not receive the same sort of monetary love that display and search are getting. Last year, worldwide, I think this is a worldwide statistic, $228 billion spent on digital advertising, and that's going to go up to $375 billion worldwide. In Canada, we spent just under $5 billion last year, and that'll almost double by 2021. So it is a large market. So some examples, very quickly. what does a search ad look like? What is a search ad? You've heard pay-per-click. Really, search ads started in and around pay-per-click, which is where, your ad here, you do a search for something, say digital marketing agency, and the first results that appear, usually, if it's a popular search at all, you will see ads. These are denoted with the little ad logo there. And this is all a placement based on a number of different factors, how much you're willing to spend, but also how relevant is your ad to what's being searched. Interesting fact, 2 billion searches done every year on Google. So 62,000 searches per second, which is kind of interesting. Popular website, that google.com. Display advertising. Basically, what display advertising is it's running a sort of image, text, or video ads that sort of surround a website's content. You think about banner ads. That's really, that's not all that display is, but that's, a banner ad is display advertising. Here's an example on New York Times where, Visa's got their big banner up here running right next to a video. What about social advertising? What is social advertising? Well, again, text, image, videos that are appearing in line. I mean, essentially, it's a mixture. It's a mixture of sort of display type advertising as well as contextual advertising in different social platforms. So I'm sure everyone here who's been on Facebook has seen the suggested post. They're denoted with that title as well as sponsored links, and it's a combination here. We've got some text as well as an image. Companies can promote downloads or app installs or whatever the case may be. They can take over your entire screen if you're on a mobile device. So social, there's a lot of different things to do. And not surprising, there's a lot of people on the different social networks. Facebook's got over 2 billion. They've actually got more users than that, but I think they've got over 3 billion users, but over 2 billion users are active every month. And YouTube's got over 1.5 billion. One to watch in 2018 is Instagram, 800 million users, but it's growing like crazy. And I've got another chart that you'll see coming up soon. Now, I mentioned this before, influencer marketing. This is something that's becoming much more prevalent with sort of fitting hand in glove with social media advertising. Basically, it's the new version of celebrity endorsements. So we're not talking necessarily of, the Kim Kardashians and the Donald Trumps and the top tier influencers. A lot of this are the mid-tier influencers, really anyone who's got a loyal following. And in this particular case here, we've got a couple that I hadn't even heard of prior to putting together this slide deck, but this gal, Misty Lanning, she's got 661,000 YouTube subscribers, and this is a paid video that she was paid, her and her husband were paid to do this video to promote these food boxes. And it got over 800,000 video views. So to this company, Try the World, this is influencer marketing, and I'm sure it was very successful. They've got a coupon embedded in the description. So it is a new way to do digital advertising. Oh, and speaking of which, Kim Kardashian, back in 2008, she was getting paid $10,000 per tweet. So there's that. Programmatic advertising. What is this? Well, again, typically tends to be text or image ads. They function a lot like an advertorial. So it is going to be content a lot of times that is embedded within other content. It's a bit sneakier. It is great for promoting ideas, blog posts, ebooks, white papers, things like that. The example here that I'm showing is, as you are reading a tech article here on Time Magazine's website, you've got four other articles. Hey, you might be interested in these. Turns out these are ads. So they're labeled as such, in this case, recommended by, but this can be a very effective. We at Communicatto have had a lot of success with programmatic advertising. And finally, video advertising. When I talk about video advertising here, what I mean is videos that are running, before you watch another video or while you're in the middle of watching another video, which to me is kind of annoying, but also the top performer. Or when you finish a video, you've got an ad that runs at the end. It is also very, very effective. Just so happens that the standard 15 and 30-second ad formats tend to be the best. For whatever reason, 20 seconds is the worst. So here, for example, is just, this is a video showing it's just a quick ad running before another video. So why the heck do we want to do digital advertising? What's to be gained? What can you get out of it? What can your organization get out of it? Well, really, it's about getting your content, getting your message in front of people in a variety of different formats, and it comes with a number of different advantages. The first and one of the most powerful ones is cost. It tends to be much less expensive, pound for pound, view for view, click for click kind of idea than traditional advertising. There are huge advantages when it comes to speed. So the time in which it takes to get into market with these ads and also make changes to these ads. You know, if you've got a pay-per-click ad and you notice a spelling mistake, you can fix it in a matter of seconds, as opposed to that spelling mistake that's sitting up on the billboard on just off Deerfoot Trail. It takes a bit more time to get that fixed. Different creative formats for digital advertising. We can show not just text, we can show imagery, we can show videos, we can be interactive with this. You can get, in more creative formats are arriving all the time. This one is really, really powerful when it comes to digital advertising, is the targeting that you're able to do. You are able to be hyper precise when it comes to geography of viewers, the psychographics, the demographics of viewers. You can create magical artificial intelligence-driven lookalike audiences, which is, you know, taking a subset of people that have done something good, like visited your website or bought a product, and letting the machines, letting our robot overlords create an audience that they think is going to be a lot like that audience. Very powerful. Testing when it comes to digital advertising. Again, this comes with, you know, the creative formats and the speed. You're able to test various different ad variations, A/B testing, multivariate testing, and of course measuring it. Measurement happens in real time, and we get some meaningful data. And integration, which is very powerful, integrating with you know, Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, various different tag managers, tracking pixels, and of course different reporting platforms. Now take a pause. We've got a question from the group.
Yeah. So one of the questions is, do you have Canadian stats for social media use by channel? And we actually have.
There you go. Thank you for that question. It's great. Canadian-specific statistics. Yes, we've got some Canadian-specific statistics in here. By the usage by social media channel, I don't believe that's one that's in this presentation, but because it's such a great question, I'll see if we can quickly find one before we send this information out, and we can always attach that. But if anyone heard, that was Doug reading the question to me. He did mention that we've got a great blog post on this, so we will circulate that as well. So thank you for that question. Keep them coming. Oh, we got another one. Go ahead, Doug.
So Terry Clark is wondering, I think in the U.S., influencers have to declare when they're being paid to promote something. Is it the same in Canada? And if not, do you think we're heading that way?
Yes, great question, Terry. Thank you. So the question was, you know, do influencers have to declare when they are doing an advertisement? Apparently, you know, they do in the U.S. And really, this comes down to not so much a geographical issue where, you know, U.S. law versus Canadian law. This has to do with the terms of use of the platforms themselves. So, for example, YouTube has terms of use when you are doing an advertisement, and you need to specify that it is an advertisement in various different ways, whether that's in the description of the video or in the video itself. I know within Twitter, there are hashtags, Twitter and Instagram, there are hashtags that are required to be added, whether that's ad or endorsement. And is more of that coming? I think absolutely. And this is basically what I've seen in other different ad channels. I know that you know, Google always requires ads, for example, to be called out, and I think that that's what people are really insisting upon is transparency. So yes, more transparency to come, but of course with that is going to be you know, more sort of sneaky and subversive ways to, you know, sneak the Pepsi can into the video. So a bit of a cat and mouse game, but you know, yes, transparency is definitely that more of it is coming. Okay. Second slide here on, or continuing on with why we want to do digital advertising. Well, lots of other people are doing it. there's almost 3.5 billion people across the world that are regularly accessing the web. And within that is 82% of every single Canadian. So more than 4 out of 5 Canadians are accessing the web regularly. Saw this chart earlier. Digital ad spending is enormous, 228 billion, going up by roughly 50% in the next 3 years. And 5 billion spent last year in Canada on digital ads. So there's lots of money is pouring into digital advertising. How does it stack up against traditional? Well, as we pointed out earlier, 40% of all spending, ad spending right now is on digital. It happens to be even higher in Canada, which is very interesting. Worldwide it may be 40%, but in Canada we're almost at that precipice right now. We're almost at that 50% mark. Half of all of the ad dollars are flowing into digital. So, it's powerful, very powerful. And another reason is that social media is everywhere. We had the question earlier about statistics on, who are the active users, and these statistics I think are worldwide. They may be U.S. specific, but I know for sure they're not Canada specific. But this is meant to highlight how many people, what proportion of the population is using these different social media channels on a daily or a weekly basis. So what we've got here is I've highlighted the 2 top ones being Facebook and YouTube here, and highlighted specifically that in July of last year, 72% of the population of online users was using Facebook on a weekly basis, and 60% using YouTube on a weekly basis. What I found was really interesting was that people in my age bracket, the 35 to 54, 3/4 of those folks are using Facebook on a weekly basis, and even 55 plus, 61% of 55 plus are using Facebook on a weekly basis. And if you're looking in the far right column of this table, that is double the next highest, which is 32% for YouTube. So these are very important channels, obviously, Facebook and YouTube. In terms of up-and-comers here, I've highlighted Instagram and Snapchat, which you've likely heard of, and Reddit is one that maybe a lot of you have not heard of, but these are experiencing massive growth. So these are definitely ones to keep an eye on. So why aren't you doing it? If you aren't doing it, and we get this a lot in our in our day-to-day work. The challenges that our clients and potential clients face are quite common. A lot of times it's a lack of resources. You don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the manpower to put at this. You may not have this specific set of skills to do digital advertising. Maybe before this webinar, of course, after the webinar, you'll have much more understanding. But a lack of understanding, maybe even a lack of confidence when it comes to digital advertising. You've got conflicting viewpoints. Believe it or not, offices tend not to be homogenous when it comes to viewpoints. So some people may be more in favor of digital advertising than others. Some people may be really hung up on, the good old-fashioned, newspaper ads that have always worked for years, and we've got to keep those going. And maybe that's a little bit of lack of insight, which is sort of tied into, a bit of lack of understanding. And stakeholder buy-in is always a challenge to get. So a few reasons why you may not be doing it. Maybe this slide should have been before all the reasons you should do it, but at any rate, I'm sure this resonates with a few of you. All right, next session, best practices. We're going to do digital advertising. How are we going to do this right? Now, it's important to note out that digital advertising, like any real initiative like this, requires a strategy. Where does that fit into a more overarching strategy? Well, hopefully we've got a broad communication strategy. Could be written on a napkin. Hopefully it's more formal than that. Certainly at a larger organization, we'd expect to see a good quality communication strategy, of which a component of that would be the digital strategy for communications. And then finally, a component of that is going to be the digital advertising strategy. So this is really going to serve as your blueprint, as your map for how you do digital advertising, and how that rolls up to the overarching communication strategy. In order to try to keep this as simple as possible, really nice, tight little soundbite, I've come up with a 5-step process for digital advertising. It is goals, target, channels, creative, and then execution and optimization. I will dig into this in greater detail in coming slides, but keep in mind, of course, without a strategy, there's a lot of guesswork that goes into this, and any assumptions and guesses that you bake in early on are just going to become potentially even more troublesome as you execute. So let's talk a little bit about this 5-step process. When it comes to the goals, it's pretty simple. What are you trying to accomplish? What are your key performance indicators or your KPIs? Are you trying to sell something, a product, a service? Are you trying to generate leads? Are you trying to generate interest in a white paper that you've got, encourage downloads, build your email newsletter? If you've got sound goals, you can have sound measurement of those goals. When it comes to the targeting, we love to develop personas whenever we can. So what does the people that are going to be achieving the goals for you, what do they look like? What do they do? Where do they spend their time? How old are they? What's their income? Things like that. And perhaps more importantly, what are their requirements in order to fulfill your goals? What do they need to see or hear or feel? Once you've got your goals and you've identified your targets, well, what are the channels? What are the platforms that are going to work best to achieve your goals? And the consideration here, which I'll get into in a future slide, is what's the intent? Where in sort of the sales funnel, do your goals live? And of course, where is your target hanging out? Are they Instagrammers? Instagramming millennials, or are they old fogies like me that are going to spend all their time on Facebook and YouTube? Once you've defined that, well, it's time to get preparing your creative. So this is the message. This is the offer, your content. Is it images? Is it text, video, combination? Time to get creative. And then we have to put this into market. So, we've got our channel set up, we execute, we start spending money, and we're measuring. We're measuring the right things, and we're measuring against our KPIs. We're adjusting, we're testing. Data is your friend. This is certainly our philosophy here at Communicatto, is that we are very data-led when it comes to advertising. Like everyone, we've got lots of opinions, and we're happy to share them, but we love data. Data doesn't lie. So when it comes to selecting media channels, I talked about the sales funnel before. Sales funnel here, a basic one, and there's variations of this, but as people come into the sales funnel, they start with a general awareness of you and your offering. Then they have an interest in that, and then they're making a decision. They're making a buying decision, and then finally they're actually doing something about it. They're taking action. So where do the different channels, where do the different advertising channels fit in all of this? Now, when it comes to customer intent, the awareness channels tend to be things like programmatic or video advertising or YouTube advertising. And again, this is broad strokes here. Lots of different channels can be used for different places in the funnel. So I am generalizing here just as a guide. The social channels are great for developing interest. So the Facebook, the Instagrams, the LinkedIn, all the Twitters, these are great for generating interest. When it comes to decision making, retargeting is wonderful. I'm sure everyone on the line here has experienced, going to a website, maybe it's Sport Check, maybe you checked out a pair of running shoes, you go away, you add them to your cart, or you didn't, but you go away and you find that those dang running shoes are following you around everywhere, and it feels like Big Brother is watching, and I'm here to tell you that it's because Big Brother is watching, and that is called retargeting, and it is very effective, and it helps out very well with decision making. When it comes down to actually taking action, search advertising is wonderful for this. People, when they are in a buy mode, they tend to be searching for, how do I buy those running shoes? I'm typing in a brand name, Nike XYZ sneakers, and I'm seeing those ads right in the search engine. Hey, there's Sport Check again. So search tends to be great. One other consideration, of course, here is you cannot just go based on intent when you're selecting a media channel. As I mentioned before, think about your customers. Where are they, right? Is your audience on Twitter? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe LinkedIn is better. So, you need to sort of map your personas and where they are likely to hang out. So it's a combination of these different factors. Measurement and reporting. Here's a little cartoon. I'm going to take a second. I'm going to take a breath and let you read it. I certainly got a chuckle out of this. I'll quickly go through it. The gal asks, are the digital ads we buy actually being seen? And the gentleman says, well, absolutely. Almost half the time, at least 50% of the pixels for a whole second, hopefully by a human, maybe on a site without porn, but really there's no way to verify that. And she says that explains the low CPM. And he says, yeah, that's a great deal. These that are illustrating some of the challenges when it comes to digital advertising. It's not perfect. There's click fraud out there. There's brand safe websites that you need to be aware of. When your ads are actually being viewed, are they being viewed? Are they appearing on screen, or are they appearing down below the fold, etc.? What really gets me is, the question that the gal asked, I think, is the wrong question. Are they being seen? I mean, obviously, we want to assume they're being seen, but, the real question is, are they doing anything for us, right? So she's focusing here on CPM, which is cost per 1,000 impressions. I'll get a bit more into this. I don't care about that metric. I care about other metrics, and we'll talk about that. So when it comes to measurement and reporting, really we do this in order to validate the effectiveness of each channel or each piece of creative in relation to our goals, in relation to our KPIs, and then we're optimizing from there. And it says optimize media mix, but really we're optimizing all different facets of our digital advertising campaign. The notion of attribution, or being able to, when you get a goal achieved, being able to map that back to where it's sourced, where it started, and what gets the pat on the back. Was it that search ad, or was it the retargeting, or was it when you sat down and had a coffee with someone? That's attribution. That's difficult. And the full attribution is very difficult. So, but don't get discouraged. Focus on what you can measure. Focus on good metrics. Good metrics have tangible outcomes. For example, clicks. Clicks is not the best metric, but it's better than others. Social engagements. These are people actually taking action, being engaged with your ad. Maybe time on page on your website. Particularly if you do a lot of advocacy, which we do, time on page is a very important metric. Did you get signups for the webinar, right? Did you sell it out? Do you have leads coming in? Are you making sales? That's kind of the best outcome. And maybe video views. Are people actually watching the content you're putting out there? Now, bad metrics. Bad metrics tend to be vanity. They tend to be noise. They tend to clutter the equation. And it's funny because I'm going to show you a sample report in a bit, and I've got some vanity metrics on there. But anyway, they're prevalent. An example being CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions. Who cares? I don't care if 1,000 impressions cost $1 or it costs $1,000. If the goals that those impressions are actually achieving for me fit the bill and are profitable, then that's where I care. The total number of impressions that your ads are getting. Really vanity metric. Social follower counts. Now, take that one with a grain of salt. There's a vanity aspect to social follower counts, but believe me when I tell you that, 6 million followers is better than 600, right? But it is something that people get maybe a bit too focused on. And also there are metrics like a bounce rate. And for those who are unfamiliar, a bounce is when someone comes to your website or your landing page, they only look at that one page and then they leave. Some people think a high bounce rate is bad, but if you are just promoting that one page, 100% bounce rate could be exactly what you're after. So the point here being, be smart about these metrics and let the data guide you, not your gut. I believe very much in the gut, but as I said before, gut opinion is all well and good, but when you've got data, let it guide you. Now, a sample report. I thought I would just hit you really quick with a report. This is a report that we do. It's an internal report for some advertising that we ran in October of last year. And for the the eagle eye of you, you'll immediately see some vanity metrics here, which are impressions. Sometimes it's good to put impressions in there because they're big numbers and they look fancy. But also impressions are important just to make sure that the ads are actually in market and they're running. But we're not going to stop at impressions. we want to see clicks. And so here we've broken it out into, what our LinkedIn campaign is doing for us, what our Facebook campaign is doing for us. I've got, beside clicks in the third column here, I've got CTR, which is the click-through rate on the ads. I'm also comparing this against some benchmarks, right? So LinkedIn has a benchmark of 0.35% to 0.45% of ads get clicks. In this particular case, hey, we're crushing it. We're doing really well. The cost per click, $4.56 for every click we received. It's actually lower than benchmarks, believe it or not. So that's good. We're tracking how much money we're spending. And we're also, because LinkedIn is a social channel, we're tracking the engagements. Down below, same idea for Facebook. We're lower on one benchmark, higher on some other benchmarks, but some really great engagement there. And then we're rolling the data up so we can see everything that we've spent and everything that it's done for us. Down below, to me, this is the juicier stuff, right? These are the real KPIs. This particular campaign was done to promote down of our flight manual ebook, as well as signups for the webinar that we ran last, I think in November of last year. So, we got some good downloads, some good signups, and we're able to actually break that down into a cost per. Now, we also do our best to track what sort of leads come out of that and ultimately track what sort of business, that resulted in, but that's tougher. That's trickier. People pick up the phone, they take it offline. We have coffees with people. So it's harder to have full attribution. So these are some statistics that we can measure. So this is an example. And by the way, if you like the look out of this report, this is Google Data Studio, which is free to use and really fun and relatively easy to learn. So Google Data Studio. Case studies. Let's talk about a couple of different situations where we actually did some advertising, and we'll talk about the results. So our first case study is for our friends at the Railway Association of Canada, and I need to be, very careful because I think at least one of those folks is on this call or was scheduled to be on the call. So let me start by talking about how handsome this client is. Oh, sorry, I think we have got a question, Doug? We have a question. Okay.
So to get the conversion rates, I assume there is a back-end coding being done. Will you talk about that a bit more so we know how to capture these numbers?
Oh, to get into these actual conversions. So the question was that someone said there's an assumption that in order to get these conversion numbers, there's some back-end coding, some back-end magic going on. Absolutely. When I say back end though, or that's the viewer's word back end, it's not programming. It's not scary stuff. It's not magic. You don't need a degree in rocket surgery in order to get these numbers. It does require some integration. So when we are talking about these flight manual downloads, for example, we are measuring those downloads and we are tracking where those downloads come from, and we are able to see whether they come from Facebook or they come from LinkedIn. Same thing with our newsletter signups, the webinar signups that we do through Eventbrite. That's where all of you registered for this webinar. We're able to track that, and we're able, because of the way in which we structure certain links within advertising, all of it is tracked. So am I going to get into that? No, unfortunately, we don't have time to really get into that today. But, please, if you've got specific questions and I can help you over an email or a quick phone call, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to sort of unpack that a little bit more for you.
Just mention UTM codes as something for people to Google if they're interested.
That's a good point, Doug. Doug mentioned something called UTM codes, which I believe is Universal Tag Manager, Universal Tracking, something like that. Oh, I'm way off. Anyway, it doesn't stand for what I said, but UTM, something to dig into, if you like. Okay, case studies. The handsome folks at the Railway Association. Let's talk about them really quickly here. And this is something that we did for them I think it was the spring of last year. So the Railway Association of Canada has a bit of a problem where their workforce is aging, and I guess there's a lack of interest in railway careers. And I know that, back in the day, quote unquote, you'd ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you get, policeman, fireman, but maybe you get railway conductor. And I guess the railway conductor answer seems to be less prevalent these days. So that's a bit of an issue for the Railway Association because, they're still moving trains. And another issue is that they had a fairly low media spend, which is fine, but we want to, when we see a lower media spend, we have to be very tactical about this, right? And it's not just, oh, Super Bowl ads. We've got to be very tactical. So what are the goals? Well, working with the client, we identified the goal of, hey, let's generate some interest in some existing railway programs that are in various different colleges across Canada. So this is kind of we'll call it a mid-market approach. The approach could have been, let's try to recruit for open railway jobs right now, which is an immediate approach, or it could have been a long-term approach where let's do a bit more advocacy for school-age kids. But we sort of chose that middle tier where, we're going to target folks that are, maybe a couple of years away from potentially being involved in the railway and having a career. So what did we actually do? Well, the actions that we took here, we developed a couple of French and English landing pages, and we extolled the virtues of railway careers. Very simply, talked about what it means to have a career in rail, and we had a CTA, or a call to action, which was to request an information package. So we were advocating on behalf of 6 different colleges that had railway programs. And so we had a form on the landing pages that said, hey, if you're interested in an information package, pick from one or more of these 6 colleges. And then those information packages were delivered by the client, by the colleges themselves, directly to those students, prospective students, digitally. And we ran ad campaigns on Facebook, which comes with Instagram, which we ran image and text-based ads. So what happened for the modest media spend? We ended up with just under 13,000 visits to these landing pages, and that's all well and good, but a bit of a vanity metric. More importantly, we had over 2,000 requests for information packages. And we're able, based on the media spend, we're able to distill this down to what did it cost per request. The reason we do that is say, okay, if it's $2.38 per request, what proportion of those folks actually ended up registering for a program? And that's at the point where the college actually is generating revenue. And better yet, for the RAC, then what proportion are graduating? And, if you're able to get that all the way down to the graduation, you can talk about, the cost per graduated student, and then that can help inform future budgets for future campaigns. Lambton College is one of the colleges we worked on behalf of. At the beginning of 2017, they had 5 students in their rail program, and we generated an additional 510 prospective students to be interested in that program. The 2 Quebec colleges they sort of worked in tandem with each other because of their proximity. They ended up with 529 requests for information. They had a 100-person wait list on their rail program. So, we're very satisfied. And I think, the client was very satisfied with this campaign as well. And, hey, it even won a couple of awards. So there you go. Next case study, CEPA, the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. As I'm sure you can imagine, this is a bit topical. There are misconceptions that exist around the safety and environmental impact of pipelines, and I don't want to make this conversation political. We're not going to end up talking about BC wine or any of that kind of stuff. The challenge here is misconceptions, and how do we help to inform Canadians? What are our goals here? Specifically for CEPA, we have some key messages that we want to get out there, some fact-based messages, and we're targeting very specifically 3 different groups of people. People that are conditionally opposed to pipelines, people that are conditionally in support of pipelines, and then academics, people that are involved in research around pipelines. So this is our goal, spread some key messages. So what did we do? Well, we promoted a number of different blog posts, and we did that through, the advertorial style advertising, which is the programmatic and the native advertising. And we also had a great set of brand new, highly polished videos that we were able to promote through different channels, which included Facebook, programmatic video, and YouTube. So what happened? Well, 6 million video views. Now, in this case, that may seem a bit of a vanity metric, but for us, that's a very important metric, right? It's saying that, our videos and the impressions of the videos were much more higher than that. This is 6 million completed video views. So we know the message is getting out there. We drove over 161,000 visits to the aboutpipelines.com website. And we ended up on the social channels have over 24,000 social engagements. And these are, the likes, the shares, and the comments, and the reactions. 95% of which were positive. So this is, this is really encouraging results. And then from a dollars and cents standpoint, we reduced the cost per action compared to the previous year by 96%. And really, this was attributable to video. We'd love to take all the credit, but it's just a testament to how effective video can be in advertising these days. Okay, on to the how-to guide. And we've got about 16 minutes left, and I do want to leave some time for some additional questions. So, but I'm not going to gloss over this. It's important. How do we do it? First off, before I get into the how-to guide, how do we do it here at Communicatto? Well, not surprisingly, we start with strategy. We start with planning. We're identifying the goals, the budgets, timelines, requirements, and of course, the targets. Who are we out to talk to? Who do we want to put our messaging in front of? We're establishing our KPIs. What do we actually want to optimize for? And then, of course, if you are involved in social media advertising, you need a community management plan, because people will react. They will comment. They will say some nice things. They will say some not so nice things. So, we need to develop a plan for how we deal with that. When we get into the setup, we alluded to this before, UTM codes. This deals with things like tracking. So, each ad platform has their own way of tracking what happens after you leave the ad platform, and this is done through things that are called pixels. So we are embedding these pixels on different web pages and landing pages. We're making sure analytics platforms are all set up properly and hooked up and tested. If we're doing landing pages, we're developing those at this point, and we're setting up the different channels. We're developing our creative at this point. We're getting ready, right? All the setup here is mapped back to the strategy and the planning. Then we're in market. We're executing. We're optimizing, and we're reporting to our clients. So, we're changing the ad copy. We're changing it. We're testing it. We're updating it. We're modifying it. Any other, synonym for those words you can think of. I mean, we're in there, and we want to see what's working and what's not working. We're going to keep the winners. We're going to ditch the losers, and we're going to introduce some more to constantly be improving the results here. When we look at the results as well, we want to compare them back to previous campaigns or previous time frames. I talked about benchmarks, and benchmarks exist out there for different platforms. But if we've got our own benchmarks, let's use those as well. Are we doing better or worse than last time? That's very important. A lot of this, yes, there's a lot of data involved here, but at Communicatto, we tend to say it's 50% data and then 50% interpretation of that data. We want the data to guide us, but of course, in order for the data to guide us, we have to interpret it. So interpretation of data is very important. The diagram on the right sort of illustrates that, the cycle of get your data, analyze it, make some recommendations and changes, and then repeat, gather more data as you're going. We also do what are called health checks for our clients, and these are more in-depth analyses, sort of higher level assessments. When you're doing your monthly reports, you can get down a bit into the weeds, and so we like to, usually once a quarter, back it out a little bit and make sure, we're not just, on target with the strategy, the ad strategy here and the campaign strategy, but how are we mapping back to the digital strategy overall and maybe the communication strategy overall. And then at the end of a campaign, we're rolling it up and closing it and coming away with new best practices and what we've learned. A couple things I wanted to point out. You may see that some words here are underlined because earlier on I talked about the 5-step process for how you do it, and so I wanted to underline those words to say we're not doing anything different. We're doing the same thing. I'm presenting it in a slightly different way. The second point I wanted to make on this slide was to, when you are looking at the data, it is very important to look at the data on the ad channel itself. So if you're advertising on Facebook, what is Facebook saying in terms of the money you've spent and the clicks you've done and the actions people are taking? But assuming you're driving people to the website, you have to look at what the data says on the website as well, because they're not going to match equally. And so you want to see some of those differences. So the point is, Listen to and believe what the ad channels are telling you, but also analyze what's going on after the visitor has left the ad channel. Very important. So now your how-to guide. Oh, and here at the bottom of the slide, we've got our 5-step process. So how do we walk through this? How do we walk through the actual guide? What's your template? So first thing to think about, what am I selling? What is my sales process? And the reason I ask this question is to think about your own sales funnel. And at what point in that sales funnel do you think digital advertising can help? If you want to go so far as to say, what are my margins and what can I afford to pay per lead? If I'm selling sneakers and they're $100 a pair, and my profit margin is $20 per pair, maybe I'm willing to spend up to $10 to sell a pair of sneakers, maybe $19.99. But if you've got that data, think about that. It can be very useful. How are you going to know you're being successful with your digital ad campaign? So what are you going to measure? And what are going to be your KPIs? What are your calls to action here? Are we talking about form submissions or someone picking up the phone, signing up for a newsletter? This obviously is going to help you stay focused on your goals and help you figure out what to optimize for, right? We don't want to optimize for click-through rate if we find that, a different piece of creative is the one that's really driving those phone calls. We'll focus in on that one. Who's buying? Who's your target market? What do your customers look like? Can you build personas? What do those folks do and what's important to them? What sort of demographics or psychographics can you layer into that to get as specific as possible? And where can you talk to these people? What's the appropriate ad channel? Not just the intent of the prospect, so in other words, the location of the sales funnel, but where do they tend to hang out, right? If they're in a particular age bracket, are they more likely to be on Facebook? Are they more likely to be on Instagram? And is it going to be a search versus social? Or, something newer like programmatic, or are we going to focus in on something more classic but effective like email list building? And then, of course, what's the right content to promote? So what is the messaging you want to get out there? What do the customers need to hear? What sort of content do you need to give them in order to achieve your goals? Then when you're in market here, I encourage you to run distinct campaigns, so a start and an end. Certainly in certain channels like Google AdWords, there is a tendency to sort of turn it on and forget about it. While that makes sense sometimes, I would encourage you to have very distinct campaigns. So, if you're going to do that and you're going to run it on an ongoing basis, at least make sure you're rolling up data on a month-by-month basis, forcing yourself to look at it as though, okay, how did we do during this past campaign? What have we learned going forward? And set yourself a schedule for when you're going to do reporting and when you're going to do optimization. In the early days, the tendency is going to be to tweak all the time. And then you're going to get busy, and then you're not going to tweak at all. And you're going to forget about it, and you're going to come in 3 months later and realize, oh, whoops, I made a mistake and ended up wasting a bunch of money. So I encourage you to set a schedule. And the other thing is, for God's sake, fail lots, fail early, fail often, make mistakes, get better. That's how you do this. And even for us, we are constantly trying different things. Of course, we never make mistakes, but some things work better than others. So, we take those learnings and work to improve future campaigns. So this is your how-to guide. And don't forget, you're going to get all of this stuff. We're going to send out the presentation. Also, there's one more thing, but before I get to that, any additional questions? Doug, I'm looking to you. Doug, who's sitting beside me.
I have nothing in the chat box here, but if you draw people's attention to the chat box, they might partake.
Yes, so there is a chat box in the Join Me application, and for our last 7 minutes, if anyone has any questions, you can simply open up the chat, which is this little icon, and you can see that on my page, or no, you don't. Never mind. Then you can't see that. It's on your. If you've got the Join Me toolbar open, the chat icon I think is second from the left. If you want to ask a question in there, by all means, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm waiting. Did this question just pop in about traditional advertising? Perfect. So, viewer 29, and I don't know if maybe your parents didn't like you and called you viewer 29, but different discussion. What forms of traditional advertising have you found pair well with digital? I love that question. It's almost like it's a loaded question. And in our experience, to be quite honest, not much. Not much traditional advertising tends to pair well. That's sort of the cynical question. I will, however, say that in all fairness, we do some traditional advertising. Sometimes it's warranted to layer it in. One specific example is that some of the associations we work for are national associations, and they need to be very close to politicians. And so they spend, they want to spend a lot of time getting their messaging out in the Ottawa region. And specifically, they want to talk to people that are on Parliament Hill. So there is a lovely little newspaper called the Hill Times that goes out to all the politicians on Parliament Hill, and so advertising in there it is so hyper targeted. It can be quite effective. So to layer some of that in, it makes sense. So that's an example. But are we running TV ads? Are we running radio ads? No. We tend not to get into a lot of that sort of spray and pray traditional marketing until we have exhausted the digital channels. Next question. Any advice? Do you have any advice for working with clients that are interested in digital advertising, but don't have a defined audience? They want to target Ontarians. Yes. Now, this is a great question. I think you've got viewer 35. I think you have more targeting than you realize. Even just knowing that the folks are in Ontario is a great start. And if you go down that the path of creating personas, this can be very valuable. So and can help you with targeting. So to quickly touch on that, personas would be, creating a fictional, a hypothetical customer or advocate or viewer or whatever the case may be, and putting into that persona what you think you know about that person. Are they married? Do they have kids? How old are they? Do they live in urban centers? Do they live in rural centers? What is important to them? What are they interested in? What sort of fears or hesitations may they have about your message or your marketing or whatever the case may be? Because all of this can actually work to further define your targeting. So, you've started with Ontario people. If you develop some personas, you may find that you're able to do even better, even more precise targeting. One more question here. Why do some digital advertising companies suggest Twitter over Facebook when compared to another advertising company bidding on the same digital advertising campaign contract? Oh boy, and that was from Clara. Thank you, Clara, for that question. This is tough, right? Because if you've got a digital ad campaign that you're interested in doing, and you go out and talk to 3 vendors, you're going to get 3 different answers, unfortunately. I can only speculate that perhaps the belief of advertising company A may be that what you are trying to do could be better achieved through Twitter, whereas conversely, ad company B may think, no, Facebook is a much better platform for that. If you were able to get them both in a room and say, explain to me why, they may have good reasons, they may have poor reasons. For us, as an example, I was going to say really quickly that you may find that ad company A wants to use Twitter because they're really good at Twitter, and it's what they know, and they're not super familiar with Facebook, and maybe vice versa with ad company B. For us, as I alluded to before, we're about data. So when we are working with our clients and, we're saying, these are the digital ad channels you want to select, we really want to find out what are the goals first, what do the personas look like, because if we have got people that are over the age of 55 and what we're trying to do is we're trying to do some advocacy, we're trying to get some messages out there, my gut tells me in this case that Facebook is going to be better than Twitter. Why? Because the older people tend not to be on Twitter. They tend to be on Facebook. The other thing when it comes to Facebook versus Twitter is, for example, you've got a lot more different ways in which to advertise, different types of ads, different types of creative that you could use. So, it's kind of a long-winded way of saying they may have good reasons. I would certainly, in your position, Clara, I would ask why. You've said Twitter Tell me why you think Twitter versus the other channels. Same question to company B. Tell me why Facebook versus the other channels. Give me some data. Give me something tangible. Don't, put your gut off to the side here and give me some data. Tell me why. That's what I would advise you. Perfect timing on that, because of just one more thing in our last minute here is something we thought we would try here, is, to say thank you for all those who attended the webinar. Is we want to give away an ad strategy. So we've talked a lot about how you need an ad strategy, and we also had a slide on all the reasons why you may not be doing digital advertising. And so for the 30 to 40 people who were on the webinar today, we're going to do a draw, and we're going to give one away. So if you are interested in having this ad strategy done for your business, the URL is here. And if you want to very quickly type it in or jot it down, you're welcome to. But as I said before, we'll circulate this information. So, all the people that attended the webinar can click on this link, give us your details, and we will do a random draw for the strategy, and we'll work with you and help plan it out. Do a complete strategy for digital advertising and help you plan out, next year, next quarter, however you want to do it. We'll help you plan it out. So hopefully you will find that interesting, and we'll look forward to see everyone who submits. So thank you all for attending today. I think we had good turnout. The questions were great. I really appreciate it, again, taking your time. We've also got in here a whole bunch of different resources. If you want to go and dig into some of the charts, some of the details that were presented in here, this resources slide is part of the presentation as well. So you'll see that arrive in your inbox shortly. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll hope to speak to you soon. Take care.